Just passed into afternoon, right?
Yes.
All right. It is just now afternoon, so I'll say good afternoon, everybody. Okay, and welcome. Okay, today we're going to hold hearings and bill signings for several different pieces of legislation. I'll start by noting Intro 1785, which will expand health care benefits to surviving family members of city employees who die in the line of duty and city employees who die from illnesses related to September 11th, 2001. Also today, very important intros, 420B, 873A, 891A, 904A, and 919A, which will further reduce lead exposure in New York City. These are simple but profound ideas that we are acting on today. We're making sure that things in this city will be fairer for the family members of our heroes who gave so much to this city. And we're making sure that our city will be safer for our children. That's what we're acting on today. I'm going to start with Intro 1785. So, we all know on 9/11, the days after 9/11, we know of the heroism of so many of our public servants, so many of our first responders. But there are many, many who served us whose stories haven't been told. There are many unsung heroes as well. Traffic agents who helped vehicles to move around the World Trade Center in all that chaos and in the weeks and months after. Sanitation workers and correction officers who went to Ground Zero, who worked on the pile, who went to Fresh Kills, who did the work to try and help families recover the remains of their loved ones. Auto mechanics who helped to keep the vehicles running that were needed for the rescue and recovery effort and made sure that those efforts could continue. All of these individuals were crucial parts of this city's response. Amidst a tragedy, this city had one of those moments that makes us very proud to be New Yorkers, where everyone stood up and helped each other. And these public servants were a crucial part of it, but they didn't get the recognition they deserved. So we honor always our police officers, our firefighters, our EMTs, but we have to honor all of our public servants in the same breath, and all those who paid the ultimate price to the exposure that they experienced because of 9/11. I want to be clear that the worst price that the families paid was they lost their loved ones, but they paid another price as well. In many cases, they lost their health insurance. They lost their access to health care. Imagine a family that's dealt with tragedy and feeling all that pain and then doesn't know whether they can turn for the health care they need. This is one of the wrongs that we're righting here today. So it's an injustice that had to be fixed. This legislation will do that. Intro 1785 extends health care coverage prospectively to surviving family members, including spouses, domestic partners, and children of non-uniformed municipal employees and retired uniformed sanitation workers and correction officers who passed away as a result of a 9/11 related illness or condition. Whether you wore a uniform or not, if you were there for us, we need to be there for you and your family, and we will be. There are now approximately 85 families who are eligible for support under this bill. Over time, we believe that could increase to as many as 5,000 families. And those 5,000, the families of retirees and employees from the World Trade Recovery and Cleanup, we want to make sure that each and every one of them gets the help that they need. Also crucial to make clear, this applies beyond 9/11 related illnesses as well. The bill also provides health care benefits for instances in which non-uniform municipal employees pass away in the line of duty. We make sure their families are supported as well. I want to thank Speaker Corey Johnson, our Office of Labor Relations Commissioner Renee Campion. I want to thank all the labor leaders who are here. Thank you all for your advocacy, your support for those you represent and for their families. It was crucial in getting this done. I thank you. I want to now turn to the sponsor of the bill, the lead sponsor, and the chair of the Committee on Civil Service and Labor, thanking him for his exceptional efforts in getting this bill passed. Councilmember Danique Miller.
Thank you, Mayor de Blasio.
Thank you, brother. Well done.
Today, we are solidifying our commitment to our municipal employees, and particularly to the brave civilian responders who answered the call of 9/11. Introduction 1785 provides equity for families of all New York City workers, expanding health care insurance benefits to surviving spouses and their children of any New York City municipal employee who is killed while performing their jobs or have developed health conditions derived from their responding to 9/11 attacks. Previously, this benefit only applied to uniformed services. Now, and leaving out an entire portion of the municipal workforce. This legislation fills the gap. I recall the times when I was a president, a union president, and unfortunately had members killed in the line of duty. And even as my time here in the council, we had to go in and do work collaboratively with the mayor and do individual legislation. And there's a gap that happens there. And imagine that 3 months, 6 months that a family knows that debt that can be incurred or not having benefits in between. And for how do we value our municipal workforce, the men and women that serve us each and every day? This is the least that we can do to value them in their life, but in their passing as well, that we're taking care of their families. So with this bill, we give municipal workers the peace of mind they so richly deserve, knowing that that this city will provide for their families' health care needs when they become necessary, and it will happen immediately. I want to thank the mayor for hearing us on this. Commissioner, thank you as well. Oftentimes, you know, there's always debate and negotiation back and forth. This required no debate and no negotiations. We knew that this was something that had to get done. So I really appreciate everybody who supported this legislation. Most importantly, the labor leaders that are here. There's a reason why 65 million people come to New York each and every year, right? And it is the services that get delivered by the men and women of our municipal workforce. And this is the least we can do to honor them, the work that they do by providing for their families. I want to thank my legislative director, Brandon Clark, Chief of Staff Ali Rasool-Najab, and certainly the council staff that has worked on this diligently. It is the right thing to do, and I'm excited about signing this into law.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. We have one individual signed up for public testimony, and we're very glad he is here, President of Local 831, and a dear, dear friend, Harry Nespoli. Please, we welcome your testimony.
I'm also the chair of the Municipal Labor Committee, 300,000 active members, 400,000 retirees. And I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, thank you, Commissioner, Council Member. It's important. It's important that all municipal workers get recognized in what they do. They're there every day. And I was down 9/11 that day. And municipal workers were all over the place. It didn't matter if you had a uniform on or non-uniform. It was to get together and go there and help the city of New York. And that's what city workers do. And that's what makes this one of the greatest cities in the world. And again, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Thank you. And to all my members. It's a great bill, and it's about time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Harry. Just a few words in Spanish to summarize what we're doing here. Hoy les damos cobertura de salud a familiares sobrevivientes de policías y empleados municipales. La ciudad está con quienes servirán a nuestra ciudad, uniformados o no. With that, I am happy to sign this legislation. I ask my colleagues and the labor leaders, please join me.
Hey, dude, down.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to say, I felt that looming presence. You good with that? Okay, anyone else here? This bill is now law. Excuse me. Okay. Now, very important legislation that will continue our efforts to protect our children and all New Yorkers from lead exposure. I want everyone to understand in this city we've adopted a policy is basically a vision zero approach to lead. We are working for the full eradication of lead poisoning in the city once and for all. And we have that goal within reach. And this legislation, these different bills today are going to help us achieve that goal. So it's important to recognize the city has a strong history of addressing the challenge of lead paint. 1960, in fact, the city of New York banned lead paint 18 years before the federal government managed to do that. During just the 6 years of our administration, with the extraordinary efforts of so many members of our team, I want to thank them all, we've seen a 65% decrease in the blood lead levels in kids under 6 years old. We know, despite some real progress, some sustained progress, we have to do a lot more. Last year, as I said, we committed to the goal of zero, literally no exceptions, ending lead exposure once and for all. To get to that goal, we need all departments of the city government making this a priority and working in common cause. These bills will help us achieve that, and they'll help us build on the progress that was created by Local Law 1 years ago, and now as well by the crucial initiatives that we put together with the lead-free New York City plan. I'll go over the legislation. Intro 420B requires the Parks Department to test soil for lead when conducting certain capital projects and remediating areas with soil lead levels above federal regulations. Intro 873A requires Department of Education to test school libraries, cafeterias, and gymnasiums annually for lead-based paint hazards and assess classrooms 3 times a year. Intro 891A expands the definition of multiple dwelling under Local Law 1 to include 1- and 2-family homes, which was a priority called for in the lead-free NYC plan. Intro 904A requires the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to investigate cases of elevated blood lead levels in pregnant people to identify potential sources of exposure. The bill also requires DOHMH to conduct follow-up screenings and inspections for children of these parents and to conduct outreach to new and expecting parents about the availability of lead inspections and testing. Finally, Intro 919A requires independent EPA-certified inspectors to investigate applicable dwelling units for the presence of lead-based paint hazards and to follow HUD guidelines. The bottom line, our departments working together can and will protect our children and all New Yorkers. And we won't stop until we hit that goal of zero lead exposure in this city. I want to thank Speaker Corey Johnson, Commissioner Catherine Garcia for her extraordinary efforts leading our lead abatement and prevention activities. I want to say, Commissioner, I've said it to you many times, the fact that you managed to do this while doing other important service for the city is particularly commendable, but you took on a very complex and challenging subject matter. You put together an extraordinary plan, and you've helped to make sure that that plan is being implemented every day. Thank you deeply for what you have achieved. Also, of course, to thank everyone at the Department of Health and our Department of Health Commissioner, Dr. Auxiris Barbeau. Thank you for the historic and ongoing efforts by the by the Health Department to address lead throughout the city. We appreciate that deeply. Our HPD Commissioner, Louise Carroll, who has a lot more to do as a result of this plan, and thank you for stepping up to that challenge. DOE Chancellor Richard Carranza, Parks Commissioner Mitch Silver. I want to thank as well from the Council, Councilmember Richie Torres, sponsor of Intro 919A, and Councilmember Mark Levine, Chair of the Health Committee. Now, my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of Intro 420B and the Chair of the Committee on Environmental Protection, Councilmember Costa Constantinides.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank you and all of your team, Commissioner Garcia and Commissioner Barbeau and everyone for the collaborative effort, and of course our Speaker, Corey Johnson, that made 420B a priority. Even 50 years after we banned lead paint, it's been almost 40 years since we've banned lead in our gasoline and more than 30 since we've gotten rid of lead in our pipes. this hazardous material continues to haunt so many facets of our life. Many New Yorkers don't even realize that in some of our most famous parks, there are still traces of lead. Years later, we're still exposed to those toxic ghosts anytime we go for a respite. And as I know too often, having a 10-year-old, and I'm just passing that age, children love to play in the dirt. And they will dig in it, and they will find, no matter how many times we tell them not to stick it in their mouth, they will. So we had to find a way forward here that makes sense. And the bill that we are enacting today will simply make our parks safer. For any time we have a capital project, the agency will test the soil for the work that they're doing for lead. If there is a lead level higher than an EPA level of 400 parts per million, the department must block it off from the public and remediate the area. And this will all happen before the project begins. There are already 500 active capital projects in the Parks Department at any given time. And in Queens alone, this year, there are 50 proposed projects. So this bill will make a real change. And again, I want to thank all of my colleagues, the Speaker, Corey Johnson, and of course you, Mr. Mayor, as well, for making this a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. And now the sponsor of Intro 873A, Councilmember Margaret Chin. Just go. It's on.
Thank you, Mayor.
We could hear you anyway, Margaret.
Okay, I know. I'll make sure of that. Schools are where our kids spend most of their waking hours. When you drop your kids off, the only thing you want to know is that they're safe. There's no question that our city must do all it can to make sure the air they breathe is free of toxic lead dust. As a mom and a former teacher, I'm proud to be taking a necessary step to make sure all the spaces our children breathe in and play in are safe from lead contamination. Intro 873A will be the very first time require the Department of Education to regularly inspect and survey classrooms at least 3 times a year, and places like gymnasium, libraries, cafeteria at least once a year for lead. It is also further strengthened HPD's ability to enforce against landlords who don't comply with Local Law 1's requirement to remediate apartments upon turnover. We know that having a home where you and your children feel safe to breathe in is a human right. I thank Mayor de Blasio, our Speaker Corey Johnson, and all our council staff, and also our partners in HPD, in the Department of Education, Department of Health, for helping us to get one step closer to zero lead in New York City. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Now I want to turn to the sponsor of Intro 904A, Councilmember Carlina Rivera.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, for signing my bill today into law. It's very exciting. We've done tremendous work in the council around birth justice, and how we take care of our pregnant people in New York City, I think, is really telling to how we want to make a more equal city for everyone. So I want to thank all of the advocates who worked on these bills tirelessly, and the whole team here at the council, especially the leadership at City Hall. By the way, this row right here is very, very powerful and exactly what I want city leadership to look like. As chair of the council's...
It's like the Mod Squad over here.
Yes.
A little historical reference there.
Brilliant, brilliant. As chair of the council's Women's Caucus and Hospitals Committee, I know how important a healthy home and environment is to ensuring equitable pre- and postnatal outcomes. Elevated lead levels in pregnancy have been associated with several adverse outcomes, including gestational hypertension, miscarriages, low birth weight, and impaired neural development. No mother should be exposed to lead in our city, and my bill will ensure that thorough investigations are conducted when pregnant people test positive for lead exposure. Any potential lead sources are found and fixed, and that families receive the resources they need. I also hope this bill will give us more data and information about the number of pregnant people exposed to lead in the 5 boroughs. We need to conduct thorough investigations of this sort because housing and health are human rights, and every New Yorker deserves access to a safe home. I also want to commend Mayor de Blasio for signing all of the bills in this lead oversight package, which will provide further rules and regulations to protect everything from our parks to our school libraries, gyms, and cafeterias. I look forward to continuing to work with the mayor and my council colleagues to ensure a lead-free future in New York City.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Councilmember. And now finally, the Chair of the Committee on Housing and Buildings, Councilmember Robert Cornegy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have the distinct pleasure of making sure that this suite of bills is voted out of my committee, which I intend on doing. I want to thank Mayor de Blasio and Speaker Corey Johnson, Commissioners Catherine Garcia, Dr. Barboa, Commissioner Luis Carroll, Council Members Constantinides, Chin, and Rivera. Today represents the continued commitment of both the administration and the City Council to our children and families to strengthen the laws as it relates to lead. Lead is a neurotoxin with lifelong impacts. The dangers it poses underscores the importance of the efforts we undertake to combat its harmful impacts on our shared communities. Thanks to all the advocates, neighborhood residents, and people involved in making this day a reality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember. Before I sign these bills, we have 3 individuals signed up for public testimony. I want to welcome Rachel Spector of New York Lawyers for the Public Interest, Matthew Shasher, Northern Manhattan Improvement Corporation, and Peggy Shepard of We Act. Come on up to the microphone here to the left.
Hi, everyone.
Yes.
Okay. So New York Lawyers for the Public Interest is thrilled to be here for the signing of these laws. These laws, together with laws passed last year by the City Council, will really expand the scope of New York City's lead poisoning prevention framework and close some loopholes that were allowing landlords to escape full enforcement and regulation of deteriorating lead paint. Key protections we are pleased to see here: more frequent inspection of school areas, including spaces beyond classrooms with prompt notification to parents, as we have seen from the news, is very critical. The expansion of existing lead laws to cover the 1- and 2-family homes, a huge loophole. Thank you for putting that in your lead-free NYC roadmap and really following through on that. Measures that will strengthen the city's ability to place substantive violations against landlords who cannot show that they took the required preventative step of abating lead paint on key surfaces at turnover before new tenants enter an apartment. We think this is particularly critical, especially given some of the early results coming out of the audits that the city is doing. Thank you for doing these audits, again, part of the roadmap from last year, that are showing that a lot of landlords have not been doing this, and that's the way we get lead out of the apartments for the future. And also the mandatory inspections to really determine the presence of lead paint in apartments. Again, I think many people don't realize we don't even really know where the lead is, right? We're just presuming it's there. So we want to thank the leadership of the City Council for passing this, in particular the Speaker. Many thanks to the council staff in the back there, who spent a lot of time with the advocates going back and forth with many, many drafts and a huge package of bills with different areas of the law. It was very complicated. To the mayor, to Commissioner Garcia, I would just like to say, as we know, passing a new law is just the first step. And the critical piece is ahead of us to making sure that these laws are enforced. We know you have a lot of work to do, and we look forward to collaborating with you on that step. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Matthew Shasher, and I want to join with everything my colleague Rachel just said, but I just want to put a little perspective on this. I was deeply involved in the efforts to pass Local Law 1 in 2004, as were you, Mayor. And the key idea of Local Law 1 was to shift a lot of the burden away from the city to landlords to keep their dwellings safe. There are 300,000 units of pre-60 housing in New York City at any given moment with kids under the age of 6. The city cannot inspect all those homes, and nor should it. It shouldn't be our dollar that's being done. It should be the landlords. We built 2 things into the Local Law 1. One, landlords had to permanently abate lead paint on friction surfaces at turnover. 2, they had to do annual inspections, at least annually, for peeling lead paint and document it in writing. In the last 16 years, the city placed exactly 2 violations for each of those. 16 years. Both of those were cases where I took the city and the landlord to court. No compliance. The city just started 2 months ago to audit. I looked at the numbers last night. It appears that approximately 2/3 of the landlords that have been audited were in non-compliance with these critical functions. And I say this because I think we can pass all the best laws in the world, but if they're not enforced, the outcomes don't really change for the children. And I'll hand this up to you, Mr. Mayor, but I did an analysis last night from open data of all the peeling paint violations for lead since 1982. You can see it dipped during the Vallone era. It went up when Local Law 1 went in, but it keeps going up. In other words, the city each year is writing more and more peeling paint violations. You could say the city's doing a good job. You can also say we shouldn't be writing so many peeling paint violations anymore. 16 years into this law, that number should be going down because the landlord should be inspecting. I applaud these laws, but if we don't enforce them, we'll be back here 16 years later having the same discussion. Thank you.
Please, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, council members, and commissioners. As a member of the New York City Coalition to End Lead Poisoning, I was very supportive of local law of 2004. We thought that we had really supported the most effective lead poisoning law in the country at that time. But 16 years later, we now realize that without compliance and robust enforcement, that our kids are still being lead poisoned. And many of them, of course, are kids of color living in environmental justice communities in the most vulnerable and deteriorating buildings. I am very happy that we're taking these steps, and we still have more work to do. I assume we're going to be here in another couple of weeks signing some more lead bills that are going to help protect our kids. But I just want to say that it's clearly important that the city takes its role of enforcement very strongly, that the Department of Education begins to certify honestly the inspections they are doing and let us know what they are not doing. And we've got to ensure, thank you, Margaret, that our schools are safe places for our kids. So I want to thank you all for the support and moving ahead, but we've got to do the enforcement that's going to make the difference for our kids.
Thank you. And before we sign the bills, and I'll say a few words of summary in Spanish, I appreciate the testimony given by all three individuals and want to emphasize the point that Councilmember Rivera made. We have, some extraordinary public servants here who are going to be at the front of these efforts to create a much stricter type of enforcement than we've seen in the past. And by setting that goal of zero, it demands of us to do things that the city did not do previously. And I can certainly assure you major changes have happened at Department of Education and will continue to. So I say to my commissioners, I embrace the challenge of determining how we can create the kind of enforcement that will ensure the follow-through we need. I think we've all come a long way in changing the assumptions and changing the laws that were necessary. But if we are going to bring the goal of a zero level to life, it's going to take an aggressive type of enforcement that was not, obviously, the reality in the immediate aftermath of Local Law 1, and I believe we're up to that challenge, and I look forward to working with all of you and making sure you have what you need to achieve that goal. With that, a few words in Spanish. Hoy tomamos un paso más hacia nuestro objetivo de cero exposición a plomo para nuestros niños. Todos los departamentos y agencias de la ciudad colaboran en esta causa común. Lo que firmamos hoy hará que nuestras casas, parques y escuelas sean lugares seguros para todos los neoyorquinos. With that, I welcome the council members and any of the advocates who want to join us. Anyone who wants to come up here for the signing, please join us. I think we see eye to eye on this issue. I love when I have that on. Classic. Number 11 is here. Step forward, sir. How many would you like? Oh, what? One. That's it. There. Matthew, are you out there? Okay. I'm sitting on the floor. The only person I know who can be in the shadow of Margaret. Okay. Good work. You said freeze. I've had the joy of having my cousin John Braver visiting. I think he was wondering why I don't do the Trump thing and hold them up. We're a little more dignified here in New York City. That's right. That's right. He says right. See, that's good. That's good warning. Okay, and for Councilman Forrest, so how many do you want? Okay, that's for Councilmember Forrest. You got that. Where is Cornegy? I think we make it easy. That's your good man. Thank you. Thanks for calling. Always looking out. Okay, and where do you want those to go? Megan? Well done. Well done. Thank you. There's Austin. Austin, well done. Thank you. Appreciate it. How many more do you want? Don't be shy. Okay, that's one. You're right. To my right. Miss Lee. Where do you need that in? Over here. Okay. Go. Last call. Anyone else? Good. Here. It's a quality pen. All right, this will be the last one. Yes. This is it? Yes. All these bills, now law.